what happens if we see the Chiefs offense of old and the Chiefs defense of new? What is the ceiling here? And I'm just imagining a team that, for the last 4 or 5 years before last year was like a top 10 to 20 all-time offense. Like, we're not talking about just a top 5 offensive unit in the NFL or whatever. We're talking the best offense year in and year out and putting up top 20 all-time efficiency stats on offense that had their fall off last year. We'll get to that on the next show. But if they put the pieces together, they can figure that out on offense. And this defense that just went on a historic postseason run. And on top of that, perhaps the future leader in career wins as a coach, and throw in a top 5 kicker ever? Like, could all of that possibly come together this year? Like, what does that season look like if it does? Is undefeated on the table?
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank. If you're thinking about starting a business or know someone who is, check out Emprise Bank's SBA loans. It's always good to know your options, and they can be your partner in possible.
Yeah, that's right, folks. The show is called Amateur Hour. I'm Ryan Scott Hall, and joining me today, I haven't seen it for a while. The beard's looking good.
Hey.
Great for an audio medium. It's his Dirkness.
Sup? Is that what I say here? Sup?
Yeah.
Sup?
Thought we were going to be a little rusty, but you nailed.
We nailed it. We're all over
it. Both of us, it looks like, in new locations. I really just moved my desk to a different corner of the room, but you actually, I think, are in a whole new house, it looks like.
Moved my desk to a whole different city. A neighbor city, but a different city.
Nice. Okay.
And so I got some open digs behind me. You can see the life go on, but I flirted with like a little background, but man, it was pretty weird. I put myself like in Arrowhead Stadium. And, I was enjoying it for writing up this, the thoughts on the preview, but didn't make the cut.
It'd probably be like pretty distracting for those watching.
Kind of weird. It's kind of weird.
Interesting. Okay. Well, listen, I mean, honestly, I think the last time that we like really chopped it up talking Chiefs was...
What happened?
February, when the Chiefs won their second Super Bowl in 2 years.
And we promised multiple off-season shows, which we did not get to. You're welcome. You're welcome, everybody.
As is typical and usual, welcome to Amateur Hour. So, yeah, I mean, the Chiefs, had an off-season. They had a draft. They had a whole training camp. And here we are, just in time, about what? I don't know, week or so before. When do we play?
Yeah. What day? We play on every single day, so it doesn't. The days don't really matter. It's just whenever we line up.
Yeah. Oh, and thankfully for you, I would imagine that like most of what you need to stream out of market, you've got. But I've seen people complaining about like some $800 price tag for what is it, Red Zone, and what's the other thing, Sunday Ticket. I don't know. No, you didn't even do it. Like, you just raw dogging. Cheap streaming.
Ron Dragon. Do you know how much I'd pay to watch the NFL season? I would drop an absurd amount of money to be able to tune in and watch it.
Yeah, and probably wouldn't even say a word about it. Like, no need to turn to the internet to complain. Dirk's just like, I can see the beach from my window, and I get to watch the Chiefs whenever I want. Yeah, worth paying for.
I didn't get preseason games though, so no preseason questions. Don't ask me what's happening.
I mean, that's fine. I am sure that
Tim Riggins is suiting up at running back. Is that true?
Say that again?
I hear Tim Riggins is suiting up at running back. Is that the case?
That's the rumor, but instead of being from Texas, I believe he's from Iowa. And in fact, it's Indiana. I'm kidding. But, a Midwesterner. Or Texas is the Midwest. I don't know. Whatever. You meant a white running back. Yes, he's going to make the team. Yeah.
That's great. Everybody's favorite player already.
So Dirk, I mean, it's time. It's time for us to lock in. We're going to hammer out some of the off-season moves, and really try to prepare for this upcoming NFL season, the way that we've done the past umpteen years. Dirk comes up with his questions, and we've got 10 questions, but 5 today.
Yeah.
We're covering 5. And you're in charge. You came up with these questions. So, off to you is Dirkness.
Yeah. One of our favorite shows that we do, 10 preseason questions, previewing the Chiefs season ahead. These are fun to do. We like to recap games more than preview, but for a whole season, this is one of my favorite times to be a sports fan, be an NFL fan. Favorite weekend of the year might be NFL Week 1. So much to unspoil. So it's very fun. But let's get into 10 questions. Oh, and we are doing 2 shows here. First 5 questions today. We'll hit on some, generic team stuff and defense today because this is a defensive team now, and offensive stuff on the next show in part 2. So let's get us kicked off with the first question, the new kickoff style here. Let's break that down. No, not really, but I do like the new kickoff. I'll say that. First question for the Chiefs 2024 season. Can the Kansas City Chiefs make history? Because this is what it all boils down to. This is why we're all here. The biggest storyline of this team, the biggest storyline of this NFL season, the biggest story in all of sports right now. The Kansas City Chiefs are chasing history, trying to become the first team to three-peat in the NFL. Across all of sports, since the early 80s, in the NFL, NBA, I shouldn't say all sports, in these sports, since the early 80s, NFL, NBA, MLB, NHL, college football, college basketball, and MLS. We've seen the Bulls do it twice. The Yankees do it once. I think it was a 4-peat. And the Lakers do it. That's it. Over 40 years here, and those are the only teams to three-peat. And now the Chiefs have a chance to do it this year. So what are your generic thoughts? What are your thoughts on chasing history here? I just wanted to set the table for everything that's ahead, because we ended last season like, man, next season is going to be insane with all of this on our plates. And it's really weird after, what kind of season it was last year, how bad it went for most of the year and still win the Super Bowl. So what are you looking forward to this season? How do you feel about chasing history here?
I mean, it's such a rare opportunity that a team is even in position to do this. And I have found it's kind of interesting in hearing really anybody outside the circle of trust talk about the Chiefs pursuing this three-peat. It seems like they're all forgetting the fact that like 2 of the 3 are already done. So they talk about how difficult it is, and it's like, really, this season is about winning 1 Super Bowl, just like any other year. The fact that it would be 3 strung together is something that I think is more like for the outside world to think about and talk about. But in a lot of ways, I wonder what it sounds like in-house. I mean, Andy Reid, this team, sometimes like the tunnel vision that they can get. They're like right now, all they're thinking about is Baltimore, right? They're not thinking about the three-peat and the legacy and all of those things. But I also don't think that they're like afraid of those stories of that narrative of what actually is happening. They're certainly aware of it. But I wonder, like, from your perspective, if you're Andy or you're Patrick or maybe even you're Bobby Stroop, like, is that something that you constantly want in the building right now? Or is it, no, we're just going to stick to the process and do it the way that we normally do it in a year? Do you treat it like it's different because it's going for a three-peat?
No, I think with them doing it day to day, I mean, we don't see them day to day, but I think you can't be looking at like a big picture like that. But I think they all are well aware of the history and the opportunity in front of them that they have to make history. And I think it's driving them. And it's their chance to put their names in history books. Like we've kind of been looking at this, like, Mahomes chasing Brady in rings or something, Andy chasing people in wins and rings and all this. They can do something that nobody else has done. None of these other teams that we've been comparing to and anything else that's happened. And so that's just a special opportunity. They're going to be fucking ready, I think. I mean, I think it is kind of just like in the sights, first sights, but you're still going through the day to day. And, I'm thinking of like Andy, he would definitely be like, this is a day to day thing. We take it day by day.
Is the record for most championships 6 by the Patriots? Do I have that right?
Oh, like most Super Bowls in the NFL?
Yeah. I want to say it would be the Patriots with 6.
I think the 49 or
because I want to say that pretty much anyone else. I think there's some 5s in there.
Steelers and Patriots both have 6.
Okay. Well, if the Chiefs pull off this three-peat, we're talking about a 5th ring. So you are. It's history. In multiple ways, right? But yeah, I mean, 3 in a row, 4 in the last 6, and 1 from 1969. But I mean, it's a lot. It's a lot to think about, like, as a fan. You say it's driving them, and I do think that that's true. I guess the way that I imagine it, if I'm trying to, transport myself into first class athlete body and mind. I think that it's like in the back there, like you know that it's happening, and that might be the thing that helps you, make every meeting on time and study that playbook at night. And do the extra treatment, to make sure that your body's right, and all those different things, like all the small decisions that it takes for you to try to get 1% better, and whether that's physically or mentally, each day, the way that they try to tackle all of those challenges, I do think that, like, there is that small voice in the back of their minds that, like, this right here, like this season more than any other, is very, very special because of the opportunity that's in front of us. But I don't think it's necessarily going to be like hung on the walls all around Arrowhead, three-peat. Boys, like I don't think that that's going to be part of the in-house narrative, but it is probably in the back of all of their minds and is driving them. Yeah.
I mean, I got a little curious about, how other teams had fared. Because, I mean, there's been, I think we got 7 teams that have won back-to-back. So 7 teams have won 2 in a row. So I was kind of curious of how all those other teams did in their 3rd season in their quest for a three-peat, which calls for a bit of an early deep dive.
Oh.
It's long. Oh.
Man, in the first 12 minutes of the show.
I know. But here we go.
That might be a record for earliest deep dive in amateur hour history.
I used to do it for the show too. That was good.
It's like
last team to do it, New England, obviously. They went 10-6. They lost to Denver in the divisional round. Most people kind of remember that game from Champ Bailey returning a fumble like 100 yards and Ben Watson kind of chasing him down diagonally in that play like at the goal line. But they went 10-6. Not a great season. They just kind of got old. There wasn't like a huge change with them. Before that was the 94 Cowboys. They went 12-4, lost to San Francisco in like an epic NFC championship clash. A great team with San Francisco. That was with Dion switching teams and going to San Francisco. And they had lost Jimmy Johnson going into that year. So I think a little bit of luster lost going into that year. The 1990 49ers, they went 14-2. And they lost to the Giants in an epic NFC championship clash. This was one of Bill Belichick's claims to fame because he helped shut down that 49ers offense. He was the defensive coordinator of the Giants at the time. They ended in the NFC Championship. The 1980 Steelers, 9-7. They didn't even make the playoffs. 1976 Steelers, they went 10-4 and lost to Oakland in the AFC Championship. 74 Dolphins. Here's a fun one. Here's where it gets a little deep. They went 11-3. They lost to the Raiders in the divisional round on the road, which is odd because there's only 8 teams that make the playoffs. So I looked into it a bit, and I found that before 1975, the NFL decided playoff seeding and home field advantage of the playoffs by a yearly rotation. So the Dolphins had the second best record in the entire league, but by random chance, they had to go play the best team on the road in the opening round of the playoffs. This blew my mind the other day when I was looking it up, so I just had to share that. So that was weird. That's how the NFL was used to run before 1975. The 1968 Packers, they lost Vince Lombardi. He retired. Starr got injured. 6-7-1. Didn't make the playoffs. Total mess. So the closest anyone's gotten is the championship game. Nobody has reached the Super Bowl with a chance to clinch the three-peat, which is what we are now chasing this year.
And if I have it right, this is just going off the dome here, I think all of those losses were to eventual champions. That Broncos,
Broncos, no.
They didn't win? Is that the year they lost to Seattle?
I think they would have lost to Ben Roethlisberger and the Steelers the next week.
Oh, interesting. Well,
all the other ones, I don't know about the old ones.
Thanks for fact checking it and actually finding that the very first one was wrong.
Hey, that's the long time.
I didn't even make it very far in before it was. Yeah, that's all right. I said I was hoping. Wasn't right.
All right, let's get into the nitty gritty here. A little bit more Chiefs centric here. Question number 2: did the Kansas City Chiefs lose the best player of the 2023 NFL season, and can they overcome it? We're starting with the defense coming in hot. The NFL 100 list is actually what got me to this point because L'Jarius Sneed wasn't even on it. And I was flabbergasted by that. And so, hang on one sec. We're going to go ahead and take a break. I forgot we take breaks here around here. We are going to take a break before I get into this rant about L'Jarius Sneed. Here's a break.
We appreciate you supporting KC Sports Network by listening to our podcast. You have helped us become the highest-ranked Chiefs podcast network in 2022 and 2023. And don't forget about our daily Substack newsletter, the best written analysis you can find on the Chiefs straight to your inbox every day. kcsn.substack.com.
All right, welcome back, folks. Sorry for that cold outro there. But back to L'Jarius Sneed, who was a cold player himself. So last year, L'Jarius Sneed, hear me out here. Chasing wide receiver ones all around the field every week, shutting them down. An unbelievable stat of not allowing a touchdown all season long, despite being one of the most targeted corners in the league. The physicality he brought to the team, setting a tone each and every week. Maybe the play of the season, forcing that Zay Flowers fumble at the goal line in the AFC Championship. I think you can make the argument he was actually the best player in the NFL last season. Not the most valuable, but the best. Remember, there wasn't really a great MVP candidate. Kind of felt like almost defaulty, like Lamar's just the QB of the best team here. All the QBs kind of had down years, historically speaking. And Sneed was the best player on what ended up being the best team. So I'm not sure who you could say did their job better than he did. And he did it all in a season where he essentially changed positions and roles. So I'm sorry to go on this long speech about a player who is no longer here, but I thought he deserved a bit of a eulogy from Amateur Hour for his season last year, and I wanted to be here to give it to him.
I don't disagree. He did really one of the best jobs of anybody in the NFL last year. Here's the thing, though, Dirk. Our job when coming out of break is to actually read advertisements in order to pay bills. So before I really dig into L'Jarius, I'm gonna that was my rewind sound.
You gonna do some L'Jarius ad reads?
Yes. Because listen,
fair.
Once again, ladies and gentlemen, we are partnered with the Boys and Girls Clubs of Greater Kansas City. So if you are looking for a way to make a big impact here in Kansas City, the Boys and Girls Clubs of Greater Kansas City, they need sponsors for their sports teams and their leagues. You can promote your business throughout the metro and help local kids at the same time. All you got to do is shoot an email to giving@helpkckids.org for more information.
If you find yourself coaching from the couch during the games, you should consider coaching from the sidelines as a volunteer with the Boys and Girls Clubs of Greater Kansas City. Learn more at helpkckids.org.
And also, listen, amateurs, podcast listeners, fans of the program. Listen, we like money around here. And if you are interested in trying to come up with an extra $500, I've got an opportunity for you. All you got to do is go to bluewirepods.com/survey. They basically put together this audience survey. They want to learn about you and your listening habits. And if you fill this thing out, then you've got a shot at winning a $500 gift card. It's just going to create a better advertising experience for all of the audience here at KCSN. And in turn, it's going to help Amateur Hour and, the KC Lab and our boys over at formerly known as Times Ours. All you got to do, here's the website again, bluewirepods.com/survey. Answer a few simple questions, and you could win $500. There's also a link in the show notes on the episode. And that's it for advertising today.
Thank God, because I wasn't doing too well with it.
And I do see Nick in the notes here, our ace producer, says that the show that I was referring to, formerly known as Times Ours, was known as Only Weird Games. It's the one that has Josh and Seth and Nate on it. Yeah, only Weird Games, because apparently that is what the Chiefs play, weird games. Sorry for the weirdness of the first 20 minutes of our show. We're a little rusty, obviously, but nobody cares. Welcome to Amateur Hour. We're going to talk about L'Jarius Sneed. The question, Dirk, that you posed, if I have it correctly in my notes, is essentially, did they lose the best player from the 2023 season, and can they overcome it? It's a tough question for this defense, man, because L'Jarius went from a guy that we all really liked and thought he was an exceptional player, but probably maybe this guy's just more valuable to the Chiefs than he is to other teams or whatever. But largely, he's also a slot corner. And then suddenly, last year, as you mentioned, it's a position change, and he's playing on the outside. And I don't know if folks remember, but the guy didn't do anything in training camp at all. He wasn't playing the entire time. He's got this knee problem. And then in the first game of the year against Detroit, he looks like he's in quicksand. I mean, just looks awful, trying to tackle Josh Reynolds on a certain play, I remember. And so, we were actually really worried about Sneed, and then he proceeded to rattle off, honestly, one of the most impressive seasons I've ever seen from a defensive back. This is up there with prime Darrelle Revis. It's up there with prime Ed Reed in terms of just every single week, you're seeing this guy do something that is really, really hard to comprehend, because he did not, do I still have this right? He did not allow a touchdown the entire year. Not one.
I think in the playoffs, he ended up allowing one in one of those games. I think
I'm blaming somebody else. He didn't give up.
But the regular season was 0 touchdowns.
And I mean, it was week after week. I think that the one player that had I don't know if it was above 80 or if it was actually the 100-yard game, it was like a fourth or fifth wideout for the Chargers.
Palmer?
I mean, I don't know. Was it Palmer? I wanted to say it was Simi Fehoko or one of the other.
Did you make that up? Did you make that name up?
He played it. That guy's from Stanford or something, maybe. One of those red schools. At any rate, he was shutting down number one wide receivers just week in and week out, absolutely erasing people. And now you look at, can the Chiefs recover from losing him? For fans, I think it's going to be hard. And the video, or I guess the quote from him the other day, did not help. That he's I was really sad because I wanted to stay. He, to me, I think was, for a lot of people, probably the number one priority this offseason, maybe even over Chris Jones, because he's younger. We were looking at, maybe the injuries or the fact that Chris Jones is truly, truly elite and has shown that for multiple seasons. Maybe people were leaning that way, but L'Jarius Sneed was at the top of a lot of people's lists. So it's going to be a tough transition just not having him out there. The guy was just where he needed to be and doing the right thing all the time. But defensively, trying to recover from it, that is a really complicated question, man, because who knows how they're going to do it? That's actually one of the next questions, right? How are they going to do it?
Yeah, we're about to get there. But I think it's a wild thing to say, because I think Sneed and McDuffie really defined the Chiefs in 2023, which is a wild thing to say about a team with Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce, Chris Jones on it. But I thought those two, they became a defensive team. Their key ingredient was Spagnuolo mixing things up on third down and getting crazy with blitzes. And he was able to do that because of the trust he had in those two to shut receivers down with no help. And so I really thought that was like the defining feature of the 2023 Chiefs. So it'll be sad to miss it. And all this being said, like, I was bummed because I'm all in on the 2024 season, on the quest for the three-peat, even if that affected the future in a negative way. But I think there's definitely an argument to be made that, getting rid of Sneed now is the best time for it. It's his value's at an all-time high. It's doubtful to see him repeat the success of last season, just naturally, because it was such a great season for him, and the injury history. So I get the move, especially long term, but I was bummed to see him go, especially for 2024. But let's get to question number 3 in helping them overcome it. Can Chimmy Nazi Roland Watziums become the next Chargeriuses of the Chiefs? So the Chiefs have had a knack for finding these
late with a straight face, and I'm just
they've had a knack for finding corners, out of nowhere. They're able to pull them out of their ass like wildflowers. It's amazing to see. This is another reason why letting Sneed walk might have been a good thing. I mean, we let Charvarius Ward walk. He's been great with the 49ers, and yet we still have the best quarterback tandem in the league after getting rid of him. So it's just wild to see. So this is just a kind of a question of, how do you see the Chiefs replacing them? Because this is definitely the biggest loss they've had from last season. How do you see them replacing him, and who do you see stepping up in that defensive backfield?
Well, here's the thing, and I think we're late to the party. I'm sure many people have said this by now, but I think it's pretty safe to say that even L'Jarius Sneed can't replace L'Jarius Sneed. Because the season that he had last year, he probably won't even be good, like that good this year, right? Like, he himself is a downgrade from what he put up as far as the numbers and performance last year. I'm really curious to see the way that Spags goes to the nickel, because if you want to say, like, how are they going to replace him? Well, it's Trent McDuffie. Like, he was the All-Pro on the roster last year, even though Sneed should have also been an All-Pro and was like a vote away or something. Your boy, Charvarius, edging him out is just some nasty work. But at any rate, the short answer is that Trent McDuffie is now your number one corner.
Which is fair, but so then who's Trent McDuffie?
Precisely. I mean, and that's where it starts to get really complex, because, like, to me, the plan has to be, like, it's got to be on paper that they're walking into their season and they're saying, well, when there's only 2 corners on the field, it's McDuffie and whoever, flip a coin between Watson and Williams. But when they literally do with their playing time, they flip a coin and they just play 50-50 snaps. I've never made any sense. I don't know if it was a matchup thing, a time of the game thing, but it was really weird how they handled the snaps between those two last year. Well, and honestly, it seems like Jalen Watson really tried to make this decision for the Chiefs and for Joshua Williams by not being healthy throughout training camp. He just said, you know what, Josh, it's your job, man. It's yours to lose. And Joshua Williams proceeded to do absolutely nothing, basically. And I don't mean to disparage him, but, like, between the two, the thing that I think is really decipherable between Jalen Watson and Joshua Williams is the fact that I actually remember Jalen Watson making plays. And Joshua Williams feels to me, and this is not meant to, again, it's really not meant as a bad thing, but he reminds me a lot of ways of Charvarius Ward, especially like before the last year or so of his time in Kansas City, where it's just like, man, Charvarius Ward played that perfectly, but didn't actually make the play. Would get beat in, some of these downfield throws. I know everyone is probably thinking of the game against the Seahawks. But, I just don't think that Joshua Williams has ever had like a really positive, noticeable, tangible impact on a football game. And Jalen Watson has. But at the end of the day,
I think Joshua Williams hit a pick in like the AFC Championship against the Bengals, I want to say. But
I mean, that's a big whiff by me if that's true. I don't remember
well,
that.
I think it was like the Brian Cook tipped pass, I want to say, to Joshua Williams picked it, or maybe that's backwards. I think Joshua Williams tipped it and Brian Cook picked it off, I think. It was amazing play. Fourth quarter of that game, I think. We'll figure that out later. Producer Nick, check on that maybe. But yeah, I think it's got to be the JW Bros over. It seems like they keep flirting with Nazi Johnson. Is that how you say it?
Is it Nazeeh?
Yeah.
It's the H that throws things off, I guess.
Nazi Johnson.
What would you say, Nazi Johnson, you do here? Like, I
really can't take it seriously wearing number 13 as a corner. That was one of the weirdest things. But yeah, I can't imagine him playing over the JW Bros. I think those two are locked in and they've played significant football. And I like those two on the outside and Trent McDuffie in the slot. They also kind of flirted about, having McDuffie move out of the slot, which would mean like Shamari Connor probably coming down into the slot and McDuffie playing on the outside. It's good to have all these different pieces. I'm just not sure. I think it's pretty set in stone that it should be McDuffie in the slot and the JW guys on the outside. And so I kind of hope it just plays out like that.
Yeah, I mean, to me, like that's essentially where I was trying to go with this has to be the plan. Like the plan has to be that when they're in three corners on the field, that it's Williams and Watson on the outside and McDuffie in the slot. Like it's that's you.
Does that mean McDuffie doesn't chase? He's not going to be chasing receivers. Which Spagnuolo never really did before. He didn't do it before last year. And I remember a tidbit from last year that it was Sneed's call. Like he wanted to start chasing receiver ones. I don't know if that was like him being an impending free agent and just looking like to get max out his deal or whatever, like prove he can do it. I mean, obviously it worked. But that was a wild decision. It was weird to see it play out over the course of the year where, that was so successful. And just that we've been pining for that for years with the Chiefs, and it's always been, over multiple coordinators, they stay on their sides. And so it was wild to see it play out last year like that.
I am seeing, thanks, producer Nick, that Brian Cook tipped the pass into Joshua Williams' hands, and so I'm still not really crediting Joshua Williams with anything on that.
It was more of a Brian Cook play, to be fair, but they were both in position, I would say.
But I mean, I don't know. I look at it and defensively, really the big question for me is like what and how Spags does with, I guess I'm just going to call him like the 11th man. And to me, that player, from formation to formation could be Leo Chenal, could be a cornerback in the slot, which presumably is Trent McDuffie in my mind. But then you have some of these other options of people that are going to cover the slot, essentially. And whether that is a Shamari Connor, who I think a lot of people were maybe expecting it's going to be McDuffie on the outside, Connor in the slot, and then the better of Williams or Watson. Or they just continue to rotate those two guys, based on the result of a coin flip. But I also see, some Jaden Hicks possibilities here. I see some Justin Reed possibilities here. And that slot position, I mean, Dirk, you were banging the drum, I mean, frankly, probably as far back as 10 years ago.
Brandon Boykin.
The importance of slot corners.
Yeah, Brandon Boykin to tweet it out.
Yeah, right. And now I think that something that people are slowly coming to realize, but it's probably at this point like pretty widely understood that one of the things that teams do in order to really like feed volume to their best receiver is move that guy into the slot. I mean, CeeDee Lamb last year led receivers in like yards and receptions. And actually I think Tyreek had a few more yards than him, but regardless, CeeDee Lamb lined up in the slot like 60% of the volume. It was him running those routes from the slot. And, it just becomes a matchup problem. It's the more difficult to cover. You don't have the sideline as your friend and all these different aspects of that position. And so taking a guy that was an all-pro slot corner and saying, you're only going to play on the outside and we're going to put, one of these safeties, a second-year player or a rookie in that spot. Or we're going to stick with the base and maybe have, who knows, Drew Tranquil or Leo Chenal or Nick Bolton in coverage trying to, do some zone concepts or whatever. I mean, I'm going to trust Spags no matter what he does. But that decision, because you don't have Sneed guaranteed on the number one best receiver and McDuffie pretty much guaranteed in the slot all year long, it gets messy. And ultimately, the guys coming on and off the field and knowing the playbook and how young some of these players are. I have to admit, going from Sneed to any combination of all of these other lineups, it's a downgrade. Like they got worse on paper, right? I don't see any reason why that's even like a bad thing to say. It's just the truth.
Yeah, but you did hit the nail on the head with trust. And there's two things to trust here. The trust in Brett Veach to find defensive backs that are of great value, especially in late rounds of the draft. I guess all rounds of the draft, you can include McDuffie in there, but it's just hit after hit after hit. So you got to feel confident that, one of these, the JW guys, I think you're going to step up and they'll be at least solid. And then I'm very confident in one of these other guys, one of these guys we don't even know maybe, that can come in and all of a sudden be one of the next great players. Jaden Hicks here walks into the best job in all of sports, the Chiefs' third safety position, which for years has just been, either you a free agent off the street or who knows what it is, but like the Chiefs' third safety seems to always overperform. And that probably goes hand in hand with Spags, who is the other guy we should trust. And giving Spags all these pieces with how he likes to disguise things, I think he's probably very excited about the, possibilities here. Even if he doesn't have, the true shutdown corner, he has all these pieces that are like the mix between corner and safety. And he can fake all these blitz looks from over here, then bring it from the other side and do all these crazy things, which really, that was the calling card for the Chiefs. Getting third and medium to third and long last year and let Spags dial it up, and he's going to confuse you. And we saw it all the way up through and including the Super Bowl when Trent McDuffie gets free on that blitz and forces the incompletion from the 49ers for like their basic last play or whatever. So, a lot of excitement there and a lot of trust placed in these guys. And that's why I don't think, even though I hated losing Sneed, I was mad about it at the time, but you get over it quickly with the trust that we have in these guys running things.
I mean, like, one of the things that this general manager has done, and even looking back to his predecessor in John Dorsey, they always seem to have the reserves like in the chamber, right? They get the guys like a year early or whatever. And the fact that they had been rotating between Watson and Williams, both of those guys playing significant roles on back-to-back Super Bowl teams, like, sooner or later, you kind of want to know, right? And like, this is a season that's an opportunity for both of those guys to prove their value to this team. Not that each of the last 2 years haven't been, but with all the vacated snaps from L'Jarius Sneed, like, it's about to get real, guys. A number one corner sized opportunity, or maybe just a number two corner sized opportunity, has been dropped in your lap. And so it's really up to those guys to seize it. I do think that you make a great point, though, when it comes to the type of talent, all the different skill sets that Spags has. It's going to be so difficult for a lot of quarterbacks on the schedule to know what is coming at them based strictly upon personnel or alignment. Like, there's just not going to be that many tells because so many of these guys can cover, can blitz, can tackle, like and whether it's man or zone too, like, there's just a lot there that even losing a player like Sneed, it almost even opens up some possibilities, because Sneed was probably playing largely just like man up on the best receiver, and that at least simplifies one thing in the mind of the opposing quarterback. But now they don't even necessarily have that to count on. So I do think that's interesting.
Yeah, and Chimichurri, I watched every single snap last season. I was very plugged into the Chiefs. I could never remember if he was even a corner or a safety. Like he's just kind of stayed right in between. And then this other guy that we just ended up keeping today, Chris Roland Wallace, he's listed as a safety on the, our lads depth chart that I'm looking at here. And yet I've seen people praise him for his quarterback play. So it's just these guys that are, hybrid types in between there that I think Spags really does love. And we just put around the line, in the slot, dance around, and we can do all kinds of things with. And so I think hopefully like the sum of, I'm going to try and get this right. The sum of the parts can overcome I lost it.
Let me ask you a question, kind of about this secondary. I mean, I'm going to remove McDuffie, and I guess I'll remove Justin Reed, like the best player at corner and safety. There's a lot of unknown beyond those two. Who's the guy that you believe in the most? Like, who is that player in the secondary that like you're willing to stake your reputation on? This is the dude that's like this is the guy. He's going to be doing the things that really turn heads this year in that secondary, other than the all-pro corner and the veteran safety that we know what we're getting from those.
It's a good question, and I think I know who you want to say. So I'm going to say Jalen Watson. I've always gone to ride with Jalen Watson. I always thought he should be getting the snaps over Joshua Williams. And I just trust him. I think he's made a lot of plays. Like he looks like Charvarius Ward out there, even in the same number, just running along with receivers. I've always thought he was a great player. So I'll go with him.
Yeah, I mean, thanks for letting me have Brian Cook. I am going to talk about Brian Cook. I honestly was really wondering if you were thinking about Jaden Hicks. I know that he's a rookie, but man, like I think that Jaden Hicks in this preseason, if he gets to have a healthy year, I don't see a scenario where Justin Reed is a Kansas City Chief after this season. Jaden Hicks instantly, like he and Cook and Connor as your top three safeties, like they're in really good hands. Jaden Hicks looks phenomenal for being a fourth round rookie. I have been thinking a lot about Brian Cook entering this season. I mean, just a little recap if you guys forgot. Really scary looking ankle injury that occurred like it was December 3rd. And they never put him on IR. It was to the point where we were like, is Brian Cook going to play in the playoffs? And, maybe they're going to activate him for the Super Bowl. And we just never really knew. It was kind of that week-to-week Eric Berry sort of situation, but they didn't really talk about it. We were just kind of thinking in the back of our minds, well, if you're not going to end this season by putting him on IR, then we'll see him at some point. And we never did. Well, in those first 11 games, Brian Cook played 84% of the defensive snaps and was a regular contributor on special teams. He was on the field all the time. It was his first opportunity as a starter. But I don't know, man. He really looked like an anchor in the secondary prior to getting hurt last year. I feel like we consistently heard he was just lauded for his intelligence. And most notably maybe in that helps guys get lined up sense of things. He's the vocal leader in the, on the back end and whatever. And I just found that he consistently found new ways to impact the game. He's got 12 career starts, an interception, 2 fumble recoveries, a sack, 2 forced fumbles, 4 pass deflections, 70 some odd tackles, and one of the high stepinest, most satisfying touchdowns I've ever seen. I mean,
it's his sideline to sideline speed, just as like the free safety over the top. That was. I remember thinking like, damn, we're gonna miss this a lot when he went down.
Yeah.
But his ability to play that single high and still get to those go balls on the outside, that's like very important skill to have back there. And so hopefully he doesn't lose a step from this injury at all. It seems like it was like a broken bone, wasn't it? Which is better somehow than tearing a ligament or whatever it would be. I mean, it was nasty at the time, but it was weird. Like there was that weird, like, hey, yeah, maybe we'll come back in a couple of weeks. Like how? Like his foot was going the wrong way. So hopefully he doesn't show any signs from that, because he was a very promising first-year player, or first time playing last year.
And one of the things that to me actually really jumped off the screen about him was honestly just the power that he brought when coming downhill and hitting people. Like Brian Cook, that dude will smack you. It is, and he's that tone setting type of safety.
They need Sneed because, I mean, how many games last year did Sneed come out and half the time it was a penalty, but he would come out, chuck the opposing receiver right off the line, get that hands to the face call in the first quarter. He must have had like at least 6 or 7 last year. But it helps set the tone, right? Like, we're going to punch you in the mouth. That's what we're going to do. And that's an important thing to have for a defensive team, which leads into question number 4 here. Are the Chiefs still a defensive team? Or is there a regression to the mean coming? They say that defense is more volatile than offense. It's harder to be a great defense year after year than it is offense. So it's just kind of checking where your expectations are for this defense right now, and will they still be a defensive team in 2024?
They're going to have a defense. They're going to field one. There will be 11 guys on the field for about half of every game or so. Look, man, I mean, I think that they played so well last year that, in my opinion, they were the best defense in the league. I just think that what they accomplished, and especially when you look at the playoff path after all the things that they did in the regular season, it's really one of the most impressive performances that I can recall. And regardless of whether we're talking about an offense or defense, just watching a unit do the things that they did.
Stats on that. Just remember, going into the Super Bowl, they had allowed the second fewest points per game in a playoff run since 2003, going up against the second, fourth, and sixth best offenses. Then they threw in the 49ers, who were the third best offense, and they held teams that averaged 28.3 points per game to 15.8 in the playoffs. Just a legendary run from a Chiefs defense that we're all just like, oh my God, is this a top 10 unit? Is this a top 5 unit? Oh my God, they're a top 3 unit. And I think the end of the season, it was pretty hard not to say that they were the best defense in the NFL.
I mean, ultimately, I think it's the defense that carried them through those games because of how clunky the offense was. And that was, certainly more regular season than postseason with the offensive problems. But you still saw these droughts in those games where it's like, gosh, man, how many opportunities does the defense have to give this offense before they can actually turn it into points? And that's the thing for me, is that they were just so consistent throughout the year. They had like 1 or 2 bad games. And in one of those bad games, that literally the worst game that they had of the year, Bolton was hurt and Tranquil got hurt like on the second series. And then just, Jordan Love and the Packers proceeded to put up 27 or something against, Jack Cochran. Like, the Chiefs were in big trouble in the middle of the field because of these linebacker injuries.
Which turned out not to be that bad, because Jordan Love and the Packers got extremely hot down the stretch of the season. Like, it was just kind of
surprising at the time, but then felt like kind of validating by the end of the year because, and I mean, entering this season without making many changes at all, the Packers are like probably a Super Bowl favorite in the NFC.
Or they could have been a Super Bowl last year. They blew that 49ers game. I mean, they could have easily made a Super Bowl run last year. But yeah, I did hear Belichick on McAfee this week said he was very impressed by Andy last year, learning how to win differently than they've won in the past, just kind of leaning into that defensive side. It's cool to hear Belichick talk about the Chiefs every single week. That's really cool to hear. One more stat on this. I was talking about volatility and things that just kind of, regress to the mean is the statement that I use, and that just kind of happens naturally year to year. One of the main stats that they say about that is turnovers. And that's an area where this defense can greatly improve. So even all these accomplishments we're lauding the Chiefs with, they were not good at turning the ball over. They were actually 25th in turnovers forced per drive last year. And the nerds say that's the most volatile stat of all. Those kind of always go, back and forth year to year. There's not much, I can't think of the word, correlation versus causation kind of thing. There's not much correlation year to year between turnovers. So that's an area where this defense could actually improve.
And I mean, didn't they finished with a negative turnover differential?
I think so.
Like Super Bowl champion -4 on the year or something. Kind of amazing how that worked out. And I want to say that was more on the defense than the offense. I think that the defense was not turning people over more so than the offense was just giving it away all the time. Because I think that you can break it down into like the takeaway numbers. And you just said that they were turnovers per drive. What were they? 25th? Yeah, not good, right? Not good. And so, yeah, there's definitely potential, provided Trent McDuffie maybe gets his first interception in his career.
That's an insane stat. He has 0 interceptions. That's insane.
That's a big one. And like, I don't know like where those turnovers are going to come from. It's not like they just suddenly added a huge, a ball hawk, like maybe Brian Cook being back on the field. Maybe, maybe teams taking more chances. Maybe, Jaden Hicks. Like, I don't think that Leo Chenal getting more snaps suddenly means that he's going to have a bunch of interceptions. So I don't know how it changes, but it does seem to every year. It's these teams have big changes, particularly as you mentioned on the defensive side of the ball. The defense is pretty volatile. I think it's going to be really hard to directly answer the question about, if there's this regression to the mean coming, if there's still a defensive team. I don't think that anybody's going to view the Chiefs as a defensive team this year and it's probably more about what I see, what I envision for the offense than what I envision for the defense. And so I'll save maybe that for the second show where we're kind of focusing on that side of the ball. But I mean, like, I will say yes to the regression question, but do you expect them to suddenly go from where they were to like middle of the pack or worse? Or are we still looking at like a top 10 or 12-ish defense? Because I guess that's where I'm landing is, yeah, it'll probably be harder. It might be a little unexpected in the way that it looks because we don't have Sneed, but I think they still have all the pieces necessary in order to be a top 10 defense and led really by Spags.
Yeah, I think the loss of Sneed could be felt, but I'm not expecting anything below top 8, top 10. The only thing that might change that is how you kind of talked about the offense being more productive. And so then opposing offenses, are forced to take more chances, which, would kind of up the turnover stats, but it would also up like the scoring from them just because they know they have to score to keep up. Whereas, as we figured out as last year went on, like they don't necessarily have to score. So they're kind of maybe playing it a little more conservative, which all kind of leads into our question 5, our final question for this show, kind of a tie-in for the whole team here. What happens if we see the Chiefs offense of old and the Chiefs defense of new? What is the ceiling here? And I'm just imagining a team that, for the last 4 or 5 years before last year was like a top 10 to 20 all-time offense. Like, we're not talking about just a top 5 offensive unit in the NFL or whatever. We're talking the best offense year in and year out and putting up top 20 all-time efficiency stats on offense that had their fall off last year. We'll get to that on the next show. But if they put the pieces together, they can figure that out on offense. And this defense that just went on a historic postseason run. And on top of that, perhaps the future leader in career wins as a coach, and throw in a top 5 kicker ever? Like, could all of that possibly come together this year? Like, what does that season look like if it does? Is undefeated on the table?
Talent-wise, and infrastructure-wise, yeah, it's absolutely on the table that they could go undefeated. I think that they are going to be a better team than last year, which is crazy because I said, like, the defense is clearly going to be worse without L'Jarius Sneed. When you trade what we said was maybe the best defensive player in the NFL last year, maybe one of the best players regardless of position last year, it's hard to say, oh yeah, that team can go undefeated. But I mean, they traded Tyreek Hill and then were the best offense in the NFL and won the Super Bowl a year after. So I do think if we're talking about the ceiling of this team, an undefeated season is fully on the table. To me, I guess what I'm expecting, I hope that it doesn't end the same way, but I think it's going to look a lot like 2020. After that first Super Bowl, everybody was just playing so loose and so confident every game. They were far and away the best offense in the league. They were scoring 35 a game practically. And they went 14-2 with one real loss, close loss, bad loss to the Raiders. And then they drove the bus around the stadium. And the only other loss that they had that in the regular season, they benched everybody, was week 16, week 17, whatever. And then they ended up losing that Super Bowl to Brady and the Bucs because both of their tackles were hurt. But as far as looking at the statistics from that season and going back to that regular season, it just felt like, and remember, COVID is happening. No one's in the stands most of the year. Like it was weird for sure. But the Chiefs were so much better than most of the teams that they were playing throughout the year that they were just like practically on cruise control. They were absolutely running through the league. And that is
they'd even like go out and hammer teams, and then like the team would like come back at the end and be like, oh man, it's kind of close again. And they're like, nah, we just haven't been trying for, the last quarter and a half. And, here's a first down to put the game away.
Yeah, I just there's nothing this team can't do. That to me is there's nothing that this team can't do this year.
It's what I kept pointing at last year. It was my point of optimism throughout the year. Like the offense can't stay this bad all year. We have the defense. The defense looks legit. The offense cannot stay this bad. Now, they never reached the levels of the past by any means. But we kind of figured out that they didn't have the horses for that. I think you could definitely argue that they do have the horses going into this year. So there's very much reason to believe that has turned around on offense. And if you're putting that defense with them, I mean, it's insane the potential of this team. If they reach their ceiling on both offense and defense, anything is on the table. And, you're looking at the schedule, you're those Ravens and Bengals games, the first 2 weeks, both of them at home. But if you look at those, then it starts to, open up and you can start going on a run. And something me and Kent were arguing about, we did a 21 questions a few weeks back. He said, I couldn't believe it. It angered me. He said he would rest starters in the last game of the season if we were undefeated. And I was like, there's no way. You cannot rest the starters if you're chasing an undefeated season. And he was like, it's all about the three-peat, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, no, you'd have to go for it. And I just imagine a scene, as crazy as an NFL season is going to be, chasing history, a scene with the Chiefs who are, what would it be? 17-0, 18-0, 19-0, going into a Super Bowl, chasing the three-peat for the first time. I mean, that's like the biggest sporting event in the history of sports. If they're undefeated, going for a three-peat in the NFL, like this, it couldn't possibly get bigger than that sporting event.
And if memory serves, the Super Bowl this year is in New Orleans. So if those, this is a big if, right? But imagine that the Chiefs are 19-0, going for a three-peat in New Orleans. We're going to be throwing up in the French Quarter at like 2 p.m. It's going to have we're going to have a repeat of the last time that we were in New Orleans. Oh man! Shout out to the Senior Bowl in Mobile, Alabama, where opportunities to also do some other travel. Look, Dirk, I feel like we've done some great work here today. Trying to get everybody ready for the 2024 Kansas City Chiefs season. We've really tried to cover the defense mostly in this here show. The next time that you hear from us, we're going to be talking about the offense. Really focusing on, I guess, the glamour side of the ball, the side of the ball that everybody's thinking about, because Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce play on that side of the ball. And our head coach, Andy Reid, he loves to coach the offense. Dirk, any final words before we get out of here today?
Well, I think we shook off the cobwebs here. It was a little bit rusty at the start, but it was also a stressful day for us as we survived the 53 Chiefs podcast on KCSN Cutdown Day, and we made the cut. So we're still here. We're still on the roster, and now we're going to be here for the whole year. So I'm pumped.
Fantastic. Season 13? I think it's 13. Lucky 13, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Ryan Scott Hall. He says Dirkness. This has been Amateur Hour, and we will we'll talk to you again soon. Oh, wait. That's right. I guess Justin Herbert is still Philip Rivers.
What? Sticking with it? No way. Get out of here.